Hello, boys and girls. Let's take a look at the 2017 free response question number 1, parts A, B, C, and D. I'll do the subsequent parts in a separate video. Okay, so it says that there's this country X. It has actual unemployment of 7, a natural rate of unemployment at 5, and inflation is at 3. Now, let's talk about that first before we start to look at the question. Natural rate of unemployment means full employment. Okay, if a country is at the natural rate of unemployment, the NRU, then there is only structural or frictional unemployment. There's a video on unemployment. Structural, remember, is the type of unemployment where a person needs training for a new job. And frictional means you've quit your job and you're looking for a new one. Okay? So if a country is at the NRU, there's only structural and frictional unemployment. That's good. Now, in this particular question, this country's NRU is 5%, but they have 7% unemployment. This country has unemployment above full employment, above the NRU. That means that there's cyclical unemployment. Okay? Cyclical unemployment means there's a recession. It means there are people who want to work but cannot find a job. This country has 2% cyclical unemployment. 5% is their structural and frictional, and 7% is their actual unemployment. So that means they are 2% cyclically unemployed, indicating a recession. According to Oken's law, they will have a 4% GDP gap. This country is producing 4% less than it could. Okay, that's not part of the question, but it's something that you should know for your AP exam. Okay, so we're dealing with a country that is actually in a recession. They are above full employment. Okay, and part A would like me to draw a Phillips curve. Let's go over the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve, developed by Arthur Phillips, shows that there's a trade-off between unemployment and inflation. If you want lower unemployment, Phillips said, you'll have to have more inflation. And if you want less inflation, you're going to have unemployment. Okay? He said there was a trade-off between the two. If you want less people to be unemployed, then you'll have to deal with some higher inflation. And if you want a lower inflation, then you're going to have some people that are unemployed. That's what the Phillips curve is. It's an inverse relationship between the two. The two meaning unemployment and inflation. As one goes up, the other goes down. Okay? Now, this idea of the Phillips curve was somewhat challenged in the 1970s when we had both high unemployment and high inflation. That was called stagflation. Also something that is asked quite a bit on the AP exam. And basically that was caused by the OPEC oil embargo of 73. Okay? But that's not asked in the question. What they've asked in the question is simply for you to draw a Phillips curve. So let's do that now. Okay. All right. This is part A. Okay. The horizontal axis is unemployment on the Phillips curve. And the vertical axis is inflation. There's your Phillips curve. Now, the long run Phillips curve is a vertical line. Long run Phillips curve. And that vertical line is at full employment. Remember, we call full employment YF. They also call it NRU for this problem. And that's at 5%. The short-run Phillips curve shows the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. There's the short-run Phillips curve. Okay? As inflation goes down, unemployment goes up. Okay? As unemployment goes down, inflation goes up. Now, our NRU is at 5. We're at 7% unemployment, so that's going to be higher. So that might be here at 7. Okay. And we're at 3% inflation at the same time. Okay, so here's where we are right now on the Phillips curve. And they told you to label that point B. Okay, so that's part A. It says using the values, create a Phillips curve, and put point B as to where they currently are. All right? Now, the next part of the question. Assume that the government of country X takes no policy action to reduce unemployment. Okay. What will happen to certain things? Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about now in part B. Part B says the government takes no action to cure unemployment. Or they could have said no action to cure a recession. And of course, that's the opposite of Keynesian economics. Okay, in Keynesian economics, the government plays a role to help cure a recession or cure inflation. But this talks about classical economics, pure capitalism. The government does not get involved. In other words, no fiscal policy or no monetary policy. Okay, and they're fond of asking this, what happens? And this is part B. Okay, this is what a classical economist believe. Many people are unemployed. The unemployed will become desperate for work. The workers will work for lower wages. Okay, if people are desperate for work, they will work for lower wages. Lower wages decrease the cost of production. It costs less to make stuff. Now, whenever it costs less to make stuff, companies will make more stuff because one of the factors of production is wages. In fact, it's the biggest one. So if wages decrease because workers are desperate, okay, and will work for lower wages, the companies will now make more stuff because it's cheaper to make. More stuff means more supply. So aggregate supply is going to increase. And that's what they asked. What happens to aggregate supply? And explain. Basically, this is your explanation. Many people are unemployed. The unemployed become desperate for work. Workers now will work for lower wages. Lower wages decrease the cost of production. That means it costs less to make stuff. If it costs less to make stuff, then companies will make more stuff. You studied that in the part of microeconomics that you did at the beginning of the course. Stuff that affects aggregate supply. More stuff means more supply, and so aggregate supply will increase. Okay, that's what will happen. Now they also ask, what happens in the long run Phillips curve? Okay, in the long run Phillips curve, nothing will happen. So this is B1. B2 is what happens to the long run Phillips curve, and that is nothing. The long run Phillips curve is at full employment. That does not change. Okay, the long run Phillips curve remains at full employment. That doesn't change. Okay, what will change is aggregate supply. And while it's not part of the question, I'll just go a little further about what a classical economist believes. They also believe that with more people working, AD will increase because those people that are working now have money to buy stuff, so aggregate demand will increase. Well, when aggregate demand increases, GDP increases, and the recession is cured with no government action. Okay, that's what a classical economist believes. That's not actually part of your question, but it's something that you should know. Okay, now part C. Identify a fiscal policy that could be used to reduce unemployment. So now we're back to Keynesian economics. The government is going to do something, and they specifically said fiscal policy. Now be careful, it says fiscal. Fiscal policy means government will change its spending and its taxing. That's what fiscal policy is. It's the government spending and taxing, okay? In a recession, there should be expansionary fiscal policy. And this country is in a recession. They have cyclical unemployment. They are above full employment. The their unemployment rate is above the 5% of full employment. So basically, in expansionary fiscal policy, the government should spend more and or tax less. That's expansionary fiscal policy. The government should spend more, G should go up, or they should tax less. To get more people working, the government is going to buy a lot of stuff. The government is going to increase demand. Okay, that will get people working. If the government increases demand, the factories have to meet that demand. Okay, the government might start to build bridges. They'll need more metal. The government might start to build steel and iron. The government might start to build more schools. They'll need concrete. They'll need bricks. They'll need tile for the floors. The government increases spending, puts people back to work. Or the government could do something else. The government could tax less. Now, if they tax less, consumers have more money in their pocket and businesses have more money in their pocket. So now the businesses and the consumers spend more. They increase demand. The consumption goes up. Business investment goes up. If the government taxes less, that's also expansionary fiscal policy. Consumers have more money in their pocket, so C will increase. And businesses have more money in their pocket, so I will increase. Either way, they'll be buying stuff and they'll increase demand. So if the government spends more, that's expansionary. G goes up, AD then goes up, and GDP go up. If the government taxes less, then consumers have more money. C goes up, then aggregate demand goes up, and GDP goes up. Or if the government taxes less, businesses also pay tax. Well, if they have more money because they're not paying that tax, then I goes up. Then aggregate demand goes up and GDP goes up with it. Okay. Now, Part C asked for a fiscal policy that could be used. You could simply say the government should spend more or tax less. This is actually sufficient for Part C. You could also add this, expansionary fiscal. The rest of it is explanation for you, but they don't ask for an explanation. They just ask to identify a policy. Okay. Now Part D. Part D says, draw a correctly labeled graph of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Well, you guys know that, basically. On the bottom is GDP equals output. GDP is the output of a country. And it also equals income. Because when people put things out, they get money for it, and that's their income. So those are the three things that should go on the horizontal axis. Over here is price level. Okay. All right. So we have aggregate demand, aggregate supply. Remember, this country was in a bit of a recession. So where aggregate demand and aggregate supply meet is going to be below full employment. Okay? All right, that was going to be below full employment. There's the long run aggregate supply. Now they said, show what happens because of your fiscal policy. Well, remember, government spent more, or consumers spent more, or businesses spent more. Spent more means they demanded more. So aggregate demand is going to increase. Okay, and there's aggregate demand increasing. Notice it may bring us to full employment. And that's Part D. I think that is all. Yep. Okay. So that's Parts A, B, C, and D. You'll see the others in a separate video. If you have any questions, the email is on the where the video is. Okay, I hope that was clear to you, and see you soon, kids. Thank you.
everyone's lonely and nobody's happy. You know that this shit isn't real. I'm stuck with these Saint Laurent stresses. That Gucci don't help with depression. All of this money I'm making is making me lonely and I feel obsessed. Cause I'm stuck and I'm feeling like that. All these white lines ain't putting me on track. All this saying that's just holding me back. All these skeletons pop up from my past, yeah. You wasn't there for me. I needed therapy. Baby, I need to go. Cause Hollywood's dead to me.